Two NFL stars request trades, and the Pats should absolutely be considered as a possible landing spot. That's where we start on this episode of Locked On Patriots.
You are Locked On Patriots, your daily New England Patriots podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Patriots fans? I'm your host, Nick Cattles, born and raised in New England, also host of the Everything Pats podcast, co-host of the Greg Bedard Patriots podcast with Nick Cattles, and sports talk show host, veteran. On today's episode, the good, the bad, and the ugly from Friday night's scrimmage, and the Pats are getting mighty thin where they can't afford to be. But first, it's time for Elliot Wolf and company to get on the phone and go to work. We appreciate you joining the show, making us your first listen, and for being an everydayer. The Locked On Patriots podcast is a proud partner of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. I'm sure many of you have already heard the news. Micah Parsons of the Cowboys, Terry McLaurin of the Commanders, two NFC East stars have requested trades from their respective teams because of contract negotiations, contract issues. And the Patriots should 100% place the phone call. They are absolutely in the spot to make that call. The number one priority of any professional sports team, this is Captain Obvious walking into the room. The number one priority for every single solitary professional sports team is to improve your talent. Get the best talent that you can possibly get on the roster. And I'm not going to sit here and talk about rebuilding. Oh, Nick, it's a rebuild. It's a rebuild. 2025 should be about a rebuild. No, I'm sorry. 2023, 2024, back-to-back 4-win seasons, that should push this team into urgency. Urgency to have a legitimate football program. Urgency to have a roster as good as it possibly could be. You've wasted the last 2 seasons for all intents and purposes. I don't want to see this team waste another season. Enough is enough. You're building. Look at what they did in free agency. Did the Patriots' free agency approach scream to you a team that was trying to rebuild? Do you sign that Milton Williams contract if you're looking to rebuild? If you're looking at 2027 as the goal? Of course not. You're not bringing in Carlton Davis and Robert Spillane and Williams and Morgan Moses. You're not bringing guys in who are 29 years old. Moses is 34 years old. Harold Landry on the precipice of 29. You're not bringing in those types of veterans if you're trying to rebuild. If you're putting down 2025 as a rebuild season, and you'll be perfectly fine winning 5 games or 6 games. That is not what Mike Vrabel wants. Mike Vrabel wants to compete, and he wants to compete right away if he can. And adding players like Parsons, McLaurin, any other bigger name that might become available or asked to be traded, you should absolutely be involved in those conversations. You're not doing your job if you're not involved in those discussions. And looking specifically at these two guys, we're talking about premier positions. There are a handful of premier positions in the NFL. You're talking quarterback. You're talking outside cornerback. You're talking edge pass rush guy. You're talking left tackle. And you could argue interior defensive line is becoming more and more important. There are 4 or 5 premier positions in football. And Parsons plays one. McLaurin plays one. So when you have a high-level talent like these two guys, and they want out, they're looking for a way to get out of where they are, then you have to have that phone call. You have to have those conversations. And money is no object here. The Patriots still have about $60 million of cap space available to them. So bringing in Micah Parsons, bringing in Terry McLaurin, paying them the big amount of money that they want to make, backing up that Brinks truck is not necessarily an issue with this team. Not a big deal. You could talk about them being close to the cap next year in 2026. There are a number of different things that you can do. We've seen a number of different things that you can do with contracts to help with the money situation. There are a number of contract outs coming up after this season. Kyle Duggar, Michael Wenu, A lot of those contracts that were signed by Elliott Wolf back in 2024, a lot of those guys, they have outs in the contract. So there's a lot of different ways they can restructure. I'm not worried about the money whatsoever. So let's hone in on both these guys. Let's start with Micah Parsons. Parsons is only 26 years old. When you talk about entering your prime football, usually 26, 27 is the true beginning of your prime. Parsons is right there. He's walking into his prime at 26 years old. He just turned 26 years old. He's got plenty of tread left on the tires. So you're not only bringing in somebody like Parsons, if you end up making a deal, if you end up making that deal, you bring in somebody like Parsons of that talent level, but also at only 26 years old. If you want to commit long-term money to somebody, committing long-term money to somebody who's 26 makes a heck of a lot of sense. And we talk about the blue chip nature of this roster and the fact that there are not a lot of blue chip talent on the 53. You can talk about Christian Gonzalez. Absolutely. He, of course, is hurt. Looks like he'll be back and fine by week 1, which is great. You've got Gonzalez, Christian Barmore, who's had a really good camp. If he looks like the 2023 Barmore, you can have that argument that he is a blue chip guy. You hope Drake Maye takes the step and becomes a blue chip player this season. And then you could look around the rest of this roster, and it's tough to find somebody else who you should consider or would consider a blue chip talent. Micah Parsons adds to the blue chip core. He's not only blue chip talent, he fits the timeline perfectly. 26 years old, you still have or should have 4, 5, 6 seasons of great football from this guy. And so the idea of adding to that blue chip core a 2-time All-Pro, a legitimate game-changing impact type of player. Parsons can single-handedly ruin a football game. And when you have a player like that, you've got to do everything you can to keep him happy. And Dallas apparently isn't doing that just yet. Maybe the Patriots want to do that. A game changer who is also versatile. You think about Terrell Williams and Mike Vrabel, what they want to do with this defense, what they love to do with their defensive line, simulated pressures, dropping their defensive linemen into coverage at times, sending linebackers, playing games. Parsons fits perfectly within that defensive framework. Now let's get to Terry McLaurin. I think a lot of people out there would say, oh, you absolutely have to trade for Parsons. If that's something that's on the table, you've got to do it. I'm not so sure the same amount of people would feel the same way about McLaurin. I'm here to tell you, Terry McLaurin is a top 10 to 15 receiver in football. And I think he's underappreciated. I think he's borderline disrespected by a lot of people that I see. And granted, it's the Twitter world, so it's tough to find people on Twitter that like anything or will give credit to anybody. But I feel like McLaurin is very underappreciated. I've spent time in Virginia Beach on the radio. I've watched a lot of Commanders football. I've watched more of Terry McLaurin than I would guess the majority of people watching or listening to this podcast have been able to or want to watch Terry McLaurin. I've seen him play a ton of football, and this guy is a legit top 10 to 15 receiver in the game. I'm very confident in that. And if you don't want to believe me, Jeremy Fowler of ESPN recently had his, survey of executives and coaches throughout football, and McLaurin did not make the top 10 in wide receiver. However, he was the first honorable mention. So right there between 10 and 15, couple of comments, quotes from that Fowler story. Washington quarterbacks produced a 133 passer rating when targeting McLaurin last season. An NFL general manager called McLaurin, quote, criminally underrated, unquote. Then you had an NFL personnel director say the following: excellent route runner, very good hands, elite ball skills, tremendous football makeup, good for the culture. He will really take off with that quarterback and offense. And when you think about McLaurin, who has consistently been a guy who gets you 1,000 yards a season, you think about, 5 consecutive 1,000-yard seasons from him, and the quarterbacks that he had from 2019 to 2023, Heineke, Howell, Haskins, Keenum, Smith, Wentz, Kyle Allen, Brissett, Colt McCoy, Garrett Gilbert, Logan Thomas. That's a bunch of bleh. And if you want to bring somebody in who could help Drake Maye immediately, You bring in Terry McLaurin. And just imagine McLaurin, Diggs, Douglas as your top 3 receivers. That is a legitimate and, frankly, scary wide receiver core for defenses to face. McLaurin immediately gives you a big boost on offense. So if those guys are available, if they become available, if it's actually possible, yes, the Patriots should be involved. Speaking of Drake Maye finally did something he hadn't done all camp long. That and more next as we continue with today's episode of Locked On Patriots, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. It is time to fuel up and turn it up with 5-Hour Energy Transfusion. It brings the bold grape, ginger, and lime flavor of your favorite golf drink, minus the alcohol, into a quick, energizing shot. Whether you're sinking birdies or just making memories with friends, this one's a hole-in-one for your energy game. I mean, let's be honest. Some days on the golf course or off it, you just need that extra boost to stay sharp and energized. And that's what we're talking about with 5-Hour Energy Transfusion. Golf's all about the good times, good people, good flavors as well. The grape ginger lime flavor gives you the best parts of your clubhouse go-to without chasing down the Bev card. If you go to 5hourenergy.com today, that is the number 5hourenergy.com, you can use my promo code LOCKEDONNFL to receive 20% off your order. This offer only valid until September 30th on one order, cannot be used with other promotions. The code is not good on subscription orders. Whether you're meeting up with friends or trying to turn 18 holes into 36, get the energizing boost you need to power through. Order transfusion-flavored 5-Hour Energy shots today. The Patriots scrimmage on Friday night gave us some good, gave us some bad, and unfortunately gave us some ugly. Let's start with the good. The pass rush. Again, this pass rush, we've been talking about it all camp long, continues to show up, continues to show promise, gives us hope that this defense can actually get to the quarterback in 2025 without sacrificing extra bodies via the blitz. And that pass rush was, again, there on Friday night, according to my friend Greg Bedard. He wrote the following: I liked a lot of the pass rush. Saw Jeremiah Farms with a sack in a hurry, Truman Jones with 2 pressures, Christian Barmore, Braden Swinson, Harold Landry, Anthony Jennings, how about that name? Anthony Jennings and Robert Spillane jump out in that regard. So you've got a bunch of names here. Robert Spillane, blitzing as a linebacker, of course. Harold Landry screaming off the edge. Barmore creating the pressure from the interior. This is precisely what you want to see. You want to see not only a pass rush, but you want to see a pass rush in multiple spots. You want to send guys from all different levels in all different spots, positions. You want to send those guys after the quarterback, because then the offensive line is lost. The offensive line has no idea what to do with itself. If you're getting pressure from the edge, you're getting pressure from the middle, you're getting pressure via the blitz and a simulated pressure from Robert Spillane, it makes life miserable for any collective offensive line. And when we talk about the Mike Vrabel defense and Terrell Williams defense, this is something we've discussed. This defense is changing, okay? This is not your Bill Belichick defense. This is not your DeMarcus Covington defense. This defense loves to attack. This defense loves to get downfield. Milton Williams recently talked about it after a practice. He said, the difference between the Eagles and Patriots defense is that the Patriots, they just allow you to go. They want you to attack. They want you to get after the quarterback. And so that attacking style, that violent physical style of football, if you're getting a pass rush, that's precisely what you want. Those are the circumstances you want to work with. So the pass rush continues to pop. In training camp, we'll see if that is the case when Washington is in town for the first preseason game and, of course, the first joint practice, which, by the way, also means Terry McLaurin will likely be in town, which will be interesting if he hasn't signed a new deal at that point. Meanwhile, something else that was good, Kayshon Boutte. I wasn't sure Kayshon Boutte would be on this roster. Now I feel very confident he's going to be on this roster. Unless there's some kind of trade that happens, Boutte continues to show up at practice. And he showed up at the scrimmage on Friday night with a touchdown. And what you've seen from him, which is crucial given the depth of the wide receiver position and what some guys are not doing, what you see from Boutte in this camp is consistency. He is consistently making plays. Javon Baker, for example, he doesn't consistently give you anything. He'll make a spectacular play like he did against Marcellus Dial in the end zone a few practices ago where he quote-unquote mossed Dial, but then he disappears. Then he drops passes. Boutte has been a consistent playmaker in this camp, and he obviously has the trust of Drake Maye. So as we sit here in early August, it feels to me like Boutte is going to be on this team. He has shown significant growth, and he has shown the consistency that Mike Vrabel wants, and I'm sure that Josh McDaniels wants. Now, where does Boutte fall on the roster depth chart with Mac Hollins back? We'll let this thing play out. But it feels like Boutte is absolutely on this team as of right now, the way he's been playing. So that's the good. The pass rush, Kayshon Boutte. Let's get to some of the bad. You've heard this before. Ramondre Stevenson fumbled the football. He had, 7 fumbles last season? He fumbled the ball again in the scrimmage. And that's the last thing you want to see. I know it's a scrimmage, but I don't care. Fumbling at practice, fumbling during a scrimmage, fumbling in a joint practice, fumbling in a preseason game. All of that matters when we're talking about Ramondre Stevenson because of the fumbling issues that we've seen from him. All of it matters. He's got to take care of the football. Vrabel has pounded that ever since he took over the program. He has talked about securing, taking care of the football. Don't make mistakes, right? Take advantage of other teams' bad football. Well, you're not going to be able to do that if you have your own bad football. So Ramondre Stevenson fumbles again. Another bad thing, Kendrick Bourne left the field limping. Any injury is bad, especially in the preseason. You don't want to see it. You don't want to see it during a scrimmage. It's an unfortunate reality. Some guys get dinged up. Bourne got dinged up. Looks like it's a leg, foot issue. We'll see if he's back at practice on Monday, whether, he's out there and ready to go. It's a huge week for this team with the joint practice coming up in just a few days against Washington. First preseason game coming up on Friday night. It's a big, big time. The next week or two, I think, is the most pivotal time during this camp. So if Bourne misses that time, man, oh man, uphill battle. I didn't think Boutte would be on this roster. I thought Bourne would be on this roster. I went out and did a podcast at Everything Pats going back a couple months ago saying I thought Bourne could be a bigger impact guy than people think. Now I'm looking at it early August. He might not make the team. And so the injury thing, we got to keep an eye on it. Got to keep an eye on it. Unfortunately, another part of the bad at that scrimmage on Friday night was Will Campbell. Here's what Greg Bedard wrote. This capped a tough week for the rookie, as Mike Giardi noted that Truman Jones beat him on successive pass rushes, and he then received some help from Ramondre Stevenson. And Bedard writes, hey, rookies are going to have weeks like this. It happens to just about everyone. It's going to be important how he adjusts and gets going in the other direction. Ups and downs. That's what we have to be ready for. No matter how much we love this draft class, they are rookies. And Campbell is a 21-year-old rookie. Just turned 21 in January. So it's some of the ups and downs of a 21-year-old's rookie camp. And I think we have to embrace the idea that it's not going to be consistently very good or great for a lot of these young guys. But that doesn't excuse when Campbell has a bad week. And he's going to turn this thing around. We've seen it during practices. He has a tough start, then he turns it around and eventually is fine. He's got to do that this week. Tough ending to the week last week. Getting ready for this Washington joint practice. He's got to respond. He's got to bounce back. I would love to see it. Let's get to the ugly. I jinxed Drake Maye. Yeah, I talked about for multiple episodes. I threw it in there that Drake Maye had yet to throw an interception at camp. He was taking care of the football, and he ends up with a down scrimmage. 9 of 17 with not one but 2 interceptions. Poorly thrown ball to Stephon Diggs on a check down. His other interception, according to Bedard, came on the final play of the scrimmage, 2-minute situation. Looked like there was a miscommunication between Maye and Kyle Williams. Again, ups and downs, rookie, young team. These things happen. Alex Austin would have had a pick 6, but he slid down on purpose to end the game. Maye's only touchdown during the scrimmage was on a trick play to a wide-open Kyle Williams. Maye was 4 of 5 to start the scrimmage, the opening drive, but then he went 4 of 9 the rest of the way. He threw, 4 or 5 footballs away. And Bedard wrote, it's hard to tell what the issue was. Could it have been the receivers he was playing with? Could have been. He was having trouble finding people open on time. He did have a nice scramble on 3rd and 10, but we also have to remember the context and the details here. The offensive line and the wide receivers for this scrimmage, they were jumbled up. They had like what pretty much ended up being like a fantasy football draft for this scrimmage. So you had different guys in different spots, and Maye was out there with some receivers that he hasn't practiced with very often. So we have to remember that. We also have to think, the Williams, again, the pick six, or would have been pick six. Williams is young, miscommunication with the quarterback. That stuff happens. We don't want to excuse it all, but Drake Maye finally threw a couple of picks. Hopefully it's out of his system as he gets ready for the joint practice this week. Those types of practices happen even for some of the best players. So let's just hope it was one scrimmage that was a down. Maye gets right back on the horse and ends up having a really good week of practice, because overall, Drake Maye has had a really good camp. So this is just a blip, and hopefully it remains a blip. All right, a big problem is brewing over the past few days of camp. We tell you what that is next as we continue with today's episode of Locked On Patriots, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We've all been there, logging on early, waiting forever for concert tickets to go on sale, only to lose your spot for a show you've been dying to see. It's happened to me countless times. Live music should be about making memories, not dealing with the stress of ticket shopping. That's where Game Time comes in. Game Time makes getting concert tickets faster and easier than ever. Prices actually drop as it gets closer to showtime, so you can hang out across the street of a venue, wait for those ticket prices to drop, take advantage, and go to the show. You can save up to 60% off with their killer last-minute deals. I mean, ever wonder what your view will actually look like before you buy tickets? Well, the Game Time app shows you a panoramic seat view, so there are absolutely no surprises. Take the guesswork out of buying concert and show tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. I had questions about this offensive line before camp, and we discussed many of those questions. The Bradbury pass protection, Morgan Moses' age and seemingly decline last year with the Jets. But let's put those aside for a minute, and let's actually focus on the depth or lack thereof for this offensive line, because the second unit, that makes sense. The first backup five, Marcus Bryant at left tackle, 7th round pick. Then you had, to begin, remember, this is the first backup unit that was out there. Jared Wilson was your backup left guard. We now know that Wilson is your starting left guard as of today. Wilson was also your backup center. So whichever position he was needed most, he would be the guy. Sidney So looked like he was going to be your backup right guard. And DeMontre Jacobs is your backup right tackle / swing tackle. Well, unfortunately, the Patriots are now dealing with some injuries. So you had questions on the offensive line to begin with in multiple spots. You had a second unit that made me somewhat queasy to begin camp. And now you're dealing with injuries to the offensive line. Mike Reese wrote at ESPN, the Patriots personnel staff are likely asking the question, is more personnel needed along the offensive line? This comes after a week in which the Patriots have had 4 linemen leave practice with injuries. Bradbury with an ankle. Yasir Durant, the 3rd-string left tackle, was actually placed on IR. He's done. 2nd-string right guard, Sidney So, aforementioned. He's been out. Unknown issue. And then Caden Wallace, who is now your backup left guard behind Wilson. He's dealing with some kind of ailment that is unknown. Oh, and by the way, Vidarian Lowe, who was supposed to be your backup left tackle to Campbell, he has not stepped on the practice field since the beginning of training camp. He's been on the PUP list. So Bradbury, Durant, So, Wallace, 4 injuries on this offensive line over the past few days. Already dealing with the Vidarian Lowe injury. And as Reese wrote, that explains why undrafted guard Micah Butler from Arkansas State was one of the linemen protecting Maye in Friday's scrimmage. You don't want that. You don't want a UDFA from Arkansas State protecting your franchise quarterback. You do not want that. So there's some issues here. You start with tackle. Because of the situation, because of the backup situation, because of the injury situation with Vidarian Lowe, Will Campbell has to be good. He cannot be mediocre. He cannot be bad. Campbell has to be good from the jump. Because if Campbell's not good, what do you do at left tackle? Are you going to throw Marcus Bryant out there to protect Drake Maye's blind side? Vidarian Lowe, is he back? When's he get back? What's he look like when he comes back? He was a roller coaster in 2024. So if Campbell doesn't work out at left tackle, what do you freaking do at that spot? He has to be good. Campbell has to be good at left tackle. And you also could say the same thing about Morgan Moses. Moses has to stay healthy. Now, of course, you would love him to be good, but he also just has to stay healthy. And it's obvious that the team has been managing Morgan Moses' snaps throughout camp. He's been playing a little bit more lately, and I would anticipate him being out there for the joint practice against Washington and getting most of the snaps. But the pressure on this starting five is huge. Campbell has to be good. Moses has to be healthy. The interior offensive line of Wilson, right now Ben Brown, and Micah Parsons, they have to be really good in pass protection because we don't know if the tackles are going to be consistently good against the pass rush. We certainly hope they are. But if they're not, you can't have the entire offensive line leaking. We've seen that the last 2 years. So these injuries put a lot of pressure on the starting five to stay healthy and to be at least passable when it comes to their level of production and their level of consistency. Something else. When I think of the offensive line, I think about TreVeyon Henderson and how he has to be an impact guy. Henderson has to be an impact guy because you picked him 38th overall. And when you spend the 38th pick on a running back, a top 40 pick on that position, instead of going out and drafting another offensive lineman. Yes, they got Wilson. Great stuff. Campbell. Yes. Fine. We get it. But they made the decision to draft TreVeyon Henderson instead of continuing to pound the offensive line. So that won't be an issue if Henderson is great. If Henderson has an awesome impact for 2025, and we're all sitting there doing cartwheels over his production and saying picking him at 38 was absolutely worth it with what he's done this season, then it makes it a little less of a hit. But if Henderson doesn't have an impact early in this season or at all this season, then you look back at that pick at 38 and you say, man, you swung on Henderson and he wasn't necessarily good. And I think he's going to be good, by the way. This is a hypothetical scenario. You look back, you say, man, we picked Henderson 38th. He didn't end up being as good as we thought he was going to be in his rookie season. And we devoted that 38th pick to a running back instead of offensive line, and our offensive line fell apart. You know, in that specific draft, in the 25 NFL draft, offensive line, defensive end, pretty deep positions in the first couple of rounds. So Henderson has to make you look good. Finally, there are ways to help this offensive line. Josh McDaniels, he will scheme ways to help the O-line. He will scheme chips from running backs and tight ends. He will scheme 6 offensive linemen. He will run the football an awful lot, which will force the defense to approach things differently and not necessarily pin the ears back if you can run the football over and over again. So there are things you can do. You can accentuate the run game. You can scheme things if you're McDaniels to help those tackles especially. Drake Maye, fortunately, has really good athleticism. That will help from time to time, help him escape the pressure. But I just hope we get to, 2026. By the time we get to 2026, I hope we can sit back and say that this offensive line is no longer the everlasting build that it has been. You feel pretty good about Wilson. You feel good about Onwenu. Campbell, ups and downs. Moses, he's got to stay healthy. And, whatever comes of the center spot, Bradbury or Brown, I would imagine it's going to be Bradbury if he's healthy. But they can't afford any more injuries. They just cannot. Finding offensive linemen is very tough, especially in August. That wraps up this edition of Locked On Patriots. Reach out to me on Twitter at NickCRadio. Don't forget to throw a comment in on the YouTube channel. And don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe. And thank you for being an everydayer and making Locked On Patriots your first listen today. For your second listen, check out Locked On Bets. Betting experts Lee Sterling and Kevin Rogers have daily MLB locks and can't miss football futures. Find Locked On Bets on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. Have a great day, and we will see you tomorrow.